Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier, and thank you for stopping by. And as I say, in this year of the virus, the COVID-19, stay safe, take precautions, take every precaution you can. Look after yourself and your families as well. Macro thoughts. What's certain is that the whole global economy has been hit by an insidious, literally invisible circuit breaker. I like this tweet from Doug Bonepath. Stock futures plummet as investors begin to realize money doesn't kill the coronavirus. The virus is not correlated to endogenous market dynamics, but is an exogenous uncertainty that remains unresolved. And as I said on the 24th of February, a rate cut or even four will produce a dead cat bounce and then a dynamic move to the downside. And I said then policymakers cannot vaccine the market with rate cuts, and that this virus, COVID-19, is non-linear and exponential, and so many people have difficulty with understanding the multiplicative nature of the mathematics of this virus. Home thoughts. You know I like to follow this professor of Islamic theology, A. Olomi, and he's talking about Israfil. The praises of Israfil are spiritually significant, for from their essence God fashions new angels who surround the throne. It is also on account of the beautiful phrases the angel is believed to be the muezzin of heaven. Israfil is said to have countless tongues and mouths which praise God in thousands upon thousands of languages. One such angel is Israfil, the angel of resurrection. The main function of Israfil is to herald the day of judgment. You can see why I kind of focused on this tweet stream. It is said even in the time of Muhammad, the horn is poised upon the angel's lips to blow. This is also how Israfil is commonly depicted in art. There is certainly a fin de siècle, even apocalyptic mood afoot. The descriptions of Israfil emphasize the apocalyptic element within Islam. The Day of Judgment is a major component of faith, and it is nigh. And therefore it feels like a decade of semiotic arousal when everything, it seemed, was a sign, a harbinger of some future radical disjuncture or cataclysmic upheaval. It is also a reminder the end cannot be predicted. Israfil has had the horn poised on his lips since the very beginning. Life goes on. And so Muslims often held a pragmatic approach to the end. It comes when it does. Be mindful of the end, but do not let it consume. It certainly felt all-consuming of late. Paul Virilio said, the end of the world is a concept without a future. Quarantining God, G.S. Bogal in The Rabbit Hole. Mass outbreaks are becoming more common, and with superbugs and bioterrorism on the horizon, we have a simple choice: make fundamental changes to the way we live, or face widespread death and debilitation. One of the key drivers of the pandemic that has gotten little attention has been religious ritual. All the evidence suggests it has been a colossal engine of infection, spreading the virus across the globe, so anyone serious about safeguarding society against future pandemics must consider an overhaul of religious traditions. The problem is these rituals are sacred to billions of people, many of whom love them more than life itself. First, we must understand the dangers of such traditions. Religious rituals often provide the ideal conditions for diseases to spread. They frequently involve masses of people regularly coming together in close proximity to share wine, the Eucharist, kiss a shrine, tawaf, or smear dye on each other, rangwali holy. The Shincheonji Church of Jesus was responsible for the vast majority of cases in South Korea. Two of the biggest viral clusters in Singapore have been connected to churches. A synagogue in Westchester County has been central to New York State's worst outbreak. Pilgrims returning from Iran's holy city of Qom have spread the virus throughout Central and South Asia. A gathering of 16,000 at a Malaysian mosque became the pandemic's largest known vector in Southeast Asia, spreading the coronavirus to half a dozen countries. To make things worse, religious rituals are typically regarded not as a cause of outbreaks, but as a cure, and therefore many have responded to the pandemic not by winding down their rituals, but by stepping them up. In Israel, nearly 1,000 people gathered at the Western Wall to pray for coronavirus victims, while in Bangladesh, tens of thousands amassed to pray for an end to the pandemic. In Iran, some Shia pilgrims tried to beat the virus by licking shrines. In Pakistan, clerics said, "We don't believe in coronavirus, we believe in Allah." In Eastern Europe, the ruling body of the Orthodox Church told its followers that coronavirus cannot be transmitted through Holy Communion due to its magic powers, and therefore the ritual is continued unabated in Orthodox churches, often using the same spoon for many mouths. In the US, Florida pastor Rodney Howard Brown, who prayed over Trump at the Oval Office, vowed not to stop services and encouraged worshippers to shake hands, while in Louisiana, Pastor Tony Spell said that he would not permit any dictator law to stop worship and continues to defy regulations by holding services that attract hundreds. Even ISIS is taking the virus seriously, telling its members to wash their hands and to avoid travel to virus-stricken Europe. The jihad against the infidels, it seems, has been postponed due to COVID-19. One of the reasons for this may be because although some religious practices spread disease, disease also often spreads religion. The Antonine Plague and the Plague of Cyprian, for instance, are regarded by historians as being pivotal to the spread of Christianity. The fear of death makes people dream of afterlives, and the random ferocity of nature and the suffering it can cause makes them grasp for meaning and solace. Already, many are proclaiming the virus God's punishment for deviation from religion and opportunistically advocating a return to old traditions to escape a future in hell. In today's interconnected world, the irrational behavior of even small groups of people can have disastrous consequences for everyone else. As I tweeted a couple of times, COVID-19 is a karmic level stealth assassin. And indeed, the viral moment has arrived. And these viruses exhibit non-linear and exponential characteristics. And where they are these close knit gatherings is where the non-linear and exponential nature is given its purest form. As I said, we're moving from a world of hyper-connectedness to a world of quarantine. A complete quarantine is the only way to vaccine this 21st century world of ours. The coronavirus has started behaving a lot like the once-in-a-century pathogen we've been worried about, said Bill Gates. This is the plague hospital at Alsa Grund. And just to go to Albert Camus, a pestilence isn't a thing made to man's measure. Therefore, we tell ourselves the pestilence is a mere bogey of the mind, a bad dream that will pass away. But it doesn't always pass away, and from one bad dream to another, it is men who pass away, and humanists first of all, because they have taken no precautions. In the same book, La Peste, for a long while God gazed down on this town with eyes of compassion. But he grew weary of waiting. His eternal hope was too long deferred, and now he has turned his face away from us, and so God's light withdrawn, we walk in darkness, in the thick darkness of this plague. On a happier note, happiness is the first sunrise after 40 days of polar night in Murmansk, northern Russia, can confirm people are losing it on the snowy dance floor. Think positive when one receptor mediating viral cell entry to the endosome closes, another receptor mediating viral cell entry to the endosome opens. Scott Berg, 777. This is from Kirsten Hedlund, Dawn Colours in Laikipia, and indeed they look very beautiful, and if you look closely at the photograph you can see Mount Kenya in the background. Political reflections: more than 935,000 people have been infected across the world and over 46,900 have died, according to a Reuters tally as of April 2nd. Over 75,000 new COVID-19 cases were reported in a single day, a new record expected given the exponential growth pattern, Zorina Q. That's viruses exhibiting non-linear and exponential characteristics. Over 4,600 new COVID-19 deaths were reported in a single day, also a new record. On that note, each man's death diminishes me, for I am involved in mankind. Therefore send not to know for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. I've been saying this for a long time, but now US intelligence says China concealed the extent of the virus outbreak, US intelligence says. Underreporting both total cases and deaths, it suffered from the disease. This is in a classified report to the White House. It's incredible it took them this long. The thrust, they said, is that China's public reporting on cases and deaths is intentionally incomplete. Two of the officials said the report concludes China's numbers are fake. The outbreak began in China's Hubei province in late 2019, and it's important to understand when it began. I believe it began in the back end of October, because then you can model the multiplicative nature and the number of infections. Country has publicly reported only about 82,000 cases and 3,300 deaths. That compares to more than 189,000 cases and more than 4,000 deaths in the US. The Chinese government has repeatedly revised its methodology for counting cases, for weeks excluding people without symptoms entirely, and only on Tuesday added more than 1,500 asymptomatic cases to its total. Deborah Birx, the State Department immunologist advising the White House on its response to the outbreak, said that China's public reporting influenced assumptions elsewhere in the world about the nature of the virus, but really intelligence should have been making their own assumptions. China is not the only country with suspect public reporting. Western officials have pointed to Iran, Russia, Indonesia, especially North Korea, which has not reported a single case of the disease, as probable undercounts. Others include Saudi Arabia and Egypt, may also be playing down their numbers. As I said weeks and weeks ago, what is clear is that the CCP suppressed information until we reached a Groucho Marx moment. Who are you going to believe, me or your own eyes? 16th of February, I was quoting the professor who said, "You will all be no better than fields of garlic chives, giving yourselves up to being harvested by the blade of power time and time again." I was also quoting him when he said, "Mass sentiment can be summed up in the line made famous in Dow's 1976 poem, 'I do not believe.'" I referenced a Reddit article where this fellow describes he reached an enormous furnace with great fires roaring within. SO2 levels were extremely elevated, as you can see from this image. So clearly those numbers don't make sense, and I rely on the mathematical modeling in particular for that point. Yesterday we saw the largest daily growth with 73,525 new confirmed cases. That's from Remy GMI. Nouriel, a man-made, not bat-made pandemic indeed, which is what I wrote about on the 1st of March in an article, The Origin of the Coronavirus. I quoted Scott Burke 777. They decided to create a pseudovirus where they essentially put a SARS-like COV in a HIV envelope. Don DeLillo, everything is barely weeks, everything is days, we have minutes to live. And what is clear now is that we've reached the Malcolm Gladwell moment, the tipping point in an epidemic when a virus reaches critical mass. It's the boiling point, it's the moment on the graph when the line starts to shoot straight upwards. Everyone needs to stop thinking COVID-19 numbers today are today's numbers. They're not strictly the present as the past. And that's why I said we're looking in the rear view mirror. In nearly every country in the world, when a virus reaches 100 people, the number of cases begins to increase by 35% daily. At that rate, a country would reach 1 million cases just 31 days after reaching 100 cases. That's assuming no mitigation measures. Test, 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 says the WHO. But why is the UK government refusing mass testing? Why are people dying needlessly? John Pilger. The Department of Health has become a revolving door of Thatcherite spibs, privatisers, corporate asset strippers, management consultants. This is Britain's deadly scandal. We are the hollow men, we're the stuffed men leaning together, headpiece filled with straw, alas. Mortality rate in the UK is rising, now at 8% and higher than all but 3 countries with at least 10,000 cases reported to date. Rover 829. A reality star botched the response to a global pandemic, and now we're all imprisoned in our homes and forced to watch him daily. Somebody decided to invite Dr. Rishi Desai onto Fox. I don't think they'll be asking him back. Have a listen. US reported 1,000 coronavirus deaths in a 24-hour period for the first time. More than 1,400 NYPD officers test positive for the virus. About 17% of NYPD is out sick. That's why I was quoting Palladium, the virus may be the most dangerous adversary America has ever faced. It's like the US was invaded. The normal defenses fail, it can't be bombed, bank accounts can't be frozen, unbreakable morale, no supply chain, lives off the land, infinite reinforcements. The toll on travel, global air travel, plummeted after Wuhan. The epicenter of the coronavirus epidemic in China was locked down. The situation is so dire that the head of the trade group representing the world's airlines called the last few months its deepest crisis ever. Commercial flights have all but stopped. From March 24 to March 30, FlightAware tracked about 280,000 flights, down almost 500,000 from the same week a year earlier. And it's a good Reuters graphics article, worth reading and looking at the graphics. That's why I said COVID-19 in a rolling sudden stop, and we're moving from a world of hyper-connectedness to a world of quarantine, and a complete quarantine is the only way to vaccine this 21st century world of ours. Let's call Chinese PMI numbers for what it is, complete bollocks, Remy GMI. And that's why I said a V-shaped recovery is a fantasy. Peters Goodman in the New York Times has a great article of why the global recession could last a long time. The world is almost certainly ensnared in a devastating recession delivered by the coronavirus pandemic. Fears are growing that the downturn could be more punishing and long-lasting than initially feared, potentially enduring into next year and even beyond, as governments intensify restrictions on business to halt the spread of the pandemic. Virus reconfigures the very concept of public space, impeding consumer-led economic growth. This pandemic is above all a public health emergency. Abrupt halt of commercial activity. I feel like the 2008 financial crisis was just a dry run for this, says Kenneth Rogoff. This time is different, he wrote. This is already shaping up as the deepest dive on record for the global economy for over 100 years, he said. Everything depends on how long it lasts, but if this goes on for a long time, it's certainly going to be the mother of all financial crises. The psychology won't just bounce back, said Charles Dumas. People have had a real shock, the recovery will be slow, and certain behavior patterns are going to change, if not forever, at least for a long while. Loss of income on the labor front is tremendous, the loss of value and the wealth effect is also very strong. And basically, I have to agree with that. And developing countries, the consequences are already severe. Not only is capital fleeing, but a plunge in commodity prices, especially oil, is assailing many countries, among them Mexico, Chile, Nigeria. China's slowdown is rippling out to countries that supply Chinese factories with components from Indonesia to South Korea. Let's move on to the currency markets. Euro dollar 109.46, dollar index 99.418, Japanese yen 107.28, Swiss franc 0.9666, the pound 124.04, the Australian dollar 0.6112, India rupee 76.175, South Korean won 12.3121, the Rial 524.96, Egyptian pound 15.749, South African rand at 18.1. Dollar index, this is a chart from Rich Economics, 99.418. Euro dollar 109.43, and X Factor top performing S&P 500 stocks in Q1, that's from the market here. I'm glad to see Netflix is there, because on the 23rd of September last year I said I am putting out a conviction buy on Netflix. Then the price was $270.75. We're considerably higher even into this bear market. Gold, I'm very bullish about it. You know my reasons, but we're currently at 594, 595. And we will hurdle 1640, and we will reach 2000 before the end of the year. Massive turnaround in front of curve crude oil. WTIC time spreads today far in excess of the flat price bounce, almost certainly related to rumors of a formative meeting between oil execs and Trump in coming days. And indeed, crude oil lost at $23.61, but I think it's a dead cat bounce, because a sudden stop means 20 million barrels of demand are not needed, and you just can't paper over that. The price of crude oil is perfectly correlated to the COVID-19 sudden stop, and as I said, will turn lower momentarily. Emerging markets post record $83 billion outflow in March due to coronavirus shock, says IIF. Compared to previous episodes of EM stress, there is no comparison. $52 billion equity outflow, $31 billion in debt outflow. Compared to previous episodes of EM stress, no comparison. And I wrote about this rather presently in the 2nd of September 2019. I described it as the China emerging markets frontier feedback loop phenomenon. And I said that phenomenon was positive for the last 2 decades, but has now undergone a trend reversal. The fallout is being experienced as far away as Germany. The Rand is the purest proxy for this phenomenon. African countries, heavily dependent on China being the main taker, are also at the bleeding edge of this phenomenon, and that this pressure point will not ease soon but will continue to intensify. Alarming FX moves across EM as sell-off enters second stage as markets realize how hard COVID-19 could hit EM. Turkish lira weakest since September 2018, Mexican peso near last week's low, South Africa and Brazil at record weak levels. Could satellites help head off a locust invasion? A single desert locust can consume its body weight in vegetation in one day. That may not sound like much for 1 2.5 gram locust, but when 40 million of them gather, considered a small swarm, they can devour as much as food as 35,000 people. Soil moisture is important because females almost always lay their eggs in wet, warm, sandy soil. After eggs hatch, the abundance of nearby vegetation becomes the most important parameter because it provides sustenance for maturing locusts and guides migration patterns. Nakalamba says vegetation across the region is much greener than average years. In fact, the greenest vegetation observed by satellite since 2000 for the December to March period. Between October and December 2019, the Horn of Africa received up to 4 times more rainfall than average, making it one of the wettest short rain seasons in 4 decades. And that's why in my article for the Africa Report, Debt, Virus and Locusts Create a Perfect Storm for Africa, I said that according to the FAO, the locust problem could turn 500x by June, and those are the reasons, because of the moisture, the rain. And I said it's a perfect storm, buckle up, and let's stop popping the quaaludes. Ethiopia allows telecoms firms to provide mobile money services. This is an opening for Safaricom. I think they're going to open up much more now because they desperately need the foreign exchange. And essentially, companies will be able to offer saving, credit, insurance, and pension products. So it's a good opportunity. Government intervention, Botswana, which is one of the wealthiest governments in sub-Saharan Africa, is offering to cover 50% of employee salaries. 2nd of March, I was talking about coronavirus being exponential, non-linear, and multiplicative. I was quoting epsilon theory. Real world exponential growth looks like nothing, 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 then cluster, 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 then boom. We're in that boom phase. President Hage Geingob says the country currently has only 11 confirmed coronavirus infections, but we don't have the means to test. However, he was tested for coronavirus and came out negative. I calculate sub-Saharan Africa will contract in 2020, and it would not be an exaggeration to say we're staring into the abyss of a zombie apocalypse. RenCap, very good interview with Yvonne Mahanga on CNBC. They revised sub-Saharan African growth to 1.3%. I'm in negative territory. But have a listen because she breaks down horticulture, tourism, commodity prices, very well. South African All Shares minus 23.39% year to date. The Rand fell to 18.18, a historic all-time low. That's from Jeffrey York. Egyptian Pound 15.79, EGX30 minus 32.49% year to date. Nigerian All Share minus 21.39% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange minus 4.33% year to date, outperforming all the other indices. Yesterday, 22 more people test positive for COVID-19, bringing the total to 81 in Kenya. Amir's done some analysis and the numbers are doubling every 3 days. But you remember, once we get to 100, the number of cases begins to increase by 35%. At that rate, a country would reach 1 million cases. just 31 days after reaching 100 cases, and essentially that equation is going to be the case in Africa because we're not taking sufficient mitigation measures. And we are, of course, looking in the rear-view mirror, as I've said before. BOC Kenya is on a mission to ramp up supply of medical oxygen to both public and private hospitals amid rising numbers of COVID-19 infections. And they're actually one of the top 3 performing shares at the Nairobi Stock Exchange, up 6.9% this year. Kenya shilling at 105.30, Nairobi All Share down 19.93% year to date, NSE20 down 25.86% year to date. I'm grateful to you for stopping by.